Under the soft glow of Maison Azour's crystal chandeliers, Karoline Leavitt slipped quietly through the restaurant's side entrance. Dressed in jeans and a simple blazer after a day of back-to-back meetings, she bore little resemblance to the typical image of the owner of Boston's most prestigious dining venue. At 27, Karoline, a Harvard Business School graduate, had built a hospitality empire, owning Maison Azour and 4 other thriving restaurants across New England. Yet, she preferred anonymity, often visiting her establishments incognito to gauge operations from a guest's perspective. Tonight was one such visit. At the host stand, she requested a table for one, her voice calm and unassuming. The new host, Brandon, barely glanced at her, his eyes flicking to the well-dressed couple entering behind her. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked brusquely. Karoline smiled. "No, but any table will do." He seated her at table 17, a less desirable spot tucked behind a decorative column, perfect for her discreet observations. What unfolded over the next 15 minutes would stun the staff and reshape the restaurant's approach to hospitality. Maison Azour, with its plush blue velvet chairs, hand-painted ceilings, and sweeping views of the Charles River, was Boston's pinnacle of fine dining. Reservations were booked weeks in advance, and its strict dress code was well known among the city's elite. Few patrons knew the unassuming Karoline was the mastermind behind it all. She shunned the spotlight, letting her venue's success speak for itself. Tonight, with General Manager Frank Weber absent for his daughter's graduation, Assistant Manager Derek Willard oversaw operations for the first time. Eager to prove himself, Derek enforced policies with rigid precision. Karoline's server, Thomas Pelletier, was a recent hire with an impressive resume from Michelin-starred restaurants in New York. His technical skills were flawless, but Frank had warned him about his attitude toward certain guests. "Luxury is about how we make people feel, not just what we serve," Frank had advised. That lesson would soon be tested. From her corner table, Karoline observed the dining room, a delayed appetizer at table 23, an empty water glass at table 9, and the warm sincerity of veteran server Marissa with regular guests. Thomas approached, his demeanor shifting subtly as he noted Karoline's casual attire. "Good evening," he said, his tone cooler than with other tables. "Something to drink while you review the menu?" "I'll have a glass of the Chateau Margaux 2010, Karoline replied, choosing a $950 bottle she had personally added to the wine list. Thomas's eyebrows twitched in surprise, quickly replaced by a condescending smirk. "That's a pricey choice, madam. Perhaps a house wine. They start at $18 a glass." Karoline, unfazed, maintained her pleasant demeanor. "The Margaux is fine, thank you." Thomas hesitated, then said, "I'll need a credit card for that order." This request violated Maison Azour's policy, which required cards only for bar bottle service, not dining table orders. Karoline, intrigued by how far this would go, raised an eyebrow. "Is that a new rule?" Thomas's vague response, "for certain orders," carried a clear implication. She calmly placed her Black American Express Centurion card on the table. Thomas's eyes widened at the rare card, but he recovered quickly, taking it with a nod before walking away. As Karoline continued observing, she noted Derek watching the exchange from across the room, his expression troubled, but not enough to intervene. Neither man knew their interaction with this unassuming guest was about to unravel into a defining moment for the restaurant. When Thomas returned with the wine, his attitude had shifted slightly, the card's prestige making an impression. Yet, rather than warming to her, he seemed to double down on his assumption that she didn't belong. "Your Chateau Margaux, madam," he said, pouring a small taste with perfect form but no warmth. Karoline sipped, appreciating the vintage she'd selected in Bordeaux the previous year. "Perfect, thank you." "Will you be dining alone?" Thomas asked, a trace of pity in his voice. "Yes, just me," she replied. He handed her the menu, suggesting straightforward dishes like the chicken, avoiding the chef's specialties he'd eagerly pitched to others. Karoline countered, "I'd like Chef Laurent's tasting menu. I hear his take on French techniques is exceptional." Thomas's surprise was evident. "That's a 7-course menu with pairings, $300 per person. It usually requires advance notice." "That sounds perfect," Karoline said evenly. Thomas, after a pause, agreed to check with the kitchen. She overheard him whispering to Derek, both glancing her way, Derek's concern growing. As the meal progressed, Karoline noted the contrast between Thomas's perfunctory service and the warm expertise of sommelier Marcus with wealthier diners. The first course, a caviar amuse-bouche with gold leaf, arrived. Thomas explained it as if to a novice. "This is caviar, fish eggs from the Caspian Sea. The gold is edible, purely decorative." Karoline nodded. "Yes, I'm familiar with beluga caviar. This is beautifully presented." Thomas, briefly thrown, pressed on with patronizing explanations through the next courses. The situation worsened when a local senator and his wife arrived without a reservation and were promptly seated at a prime table. Thomas's attention shifted entirely to them, leaving Karoline's water glass empty and her 4th course, a poached halibut with beurre blanc, languishing on the service stand. When he finally returned, he described the dish condescendingly. "It's a white fish. The sauce might be too complex for some palates." Karoline, who had suggested the sauce's kaffir lime note to Chef Laurent, asked, "Is there a hint of kaffir lime?" Thomas smirked. "No, just lemon and butter. Chef Laurent's flavors can be hard for some diners to appreciate." Further slights followed. When Karoline requested the sommelier, Thomas dismissed it, saying he could handle her questions to avoid disturbing Marcus. When she noted a slight issue with the 6th course's temperature, he brushed it off. "It served as the chef intended. Perhaps it's not what you're used to." By dessert, a chocolate soufflé with coffee crème anglaise based on her grandmother's recipe, Karoline had had enough. "This soufflé is my grandmother's recipe," she said calmly. "I gave it to Chef Laurent when we opened Maison Azour." Thomas froze. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Karoline Leavitt, the owner." The color drained from Thomas's face. "Perhaps we could speak privately," Karoline suggested, "and ask Derek to join us." In the private dining room, Thomas's apologies tumbled out. Karoline cut him off. "The issue isn't that you didn't know who I was. It's that your service depended on it." She turned to Derek. "And you should have noticed the lapse." Rather than firing them, Karoline outlined a plan. Thomas and Derek would work with Frank to revamp the service training program, using Thomas's mistakes as a case study. They would also dine anonymously at her 5 restaurants, dressed casually, to experience service as guests. "True empathy comes from lived experience," she said. "You have 4 weeks to show you, understand what went wrong, and how to ensure it never happens again." The next morning, Karoline addressed the staff, recounting the incident without naming Thomas. She introduced the Azure Standard, a new service philosophy emphasizing consistent, genuine hospitality for all. The dress code was relaxed, subjective policies were eliminated, and a training program targeting unconscious bias was launched. Staff would dine as anonymous guests monthly to refine their approach. Thomas, initially shaken, embraced the project, becoming a passionate advocate for inclusive service. 6 months later, Boston Magazine praised the Azure Standard, citing its transformative impact. A heartfelt note from an elderly diner, who felt welcomed at Maison Azour despite her simple attire, underscored the change. A year later, a celebratory dinner marked the standard's anniversary, with Karoline reflecting, "True luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about making everyone feel valued." Her restaurants thrived, their reputation for exceptional cuisine and genuine warmth drawing longer reservation lists. A single night of mistaken identity had sparked a hospitality revolution, proving that the greatest lessons often come from the most humbling moments.